three things.
Yeah.
So the same way.
Same
You
thing.
want,
And then all together.
and then I'll do
Yeah, these chords. I have a
Oh,
D. I put a D minor. Are you reading the thing, the chart that I sent?
Yeah, I think so.
It doesn't sound right. All right. Yeah, well, get rid of it. Get rid of it.
Following on the side. You don't have to play that.
You like it better with that than you did. Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And then
The A minor over yon is
I see what you mean. Yeah, No, this is no. But it's okay. And then so on the G. Stay on the G.
There is sort of that.
Okay. You only need one of the. No, you can move it. It's not there yet.
Okay, before the musicians all sit down, do we perhaps want to sing happy birthday to Edwin?
Yeah.
And we're gonna get it recording on Zoom, and then I'll just take it off of that. Ready, Edwin? Ready, Edwin? Ready. Happy birthday. If anybody wants to stay out.
Need some Viagra.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3.
Testing 4 5 6. Sound good?
Well tested. Edwin's gonna have to get his yourself together there. The microphone for the violin are off. It's okay. Unmute. Oh, it was on. All right.
Good morning, Wellspring.
Good morning.
My name is Jim Moore, and I'm part of your Sunday, December 25th, 2022 service team. This doesn't like to stay up very well. So, Vicki was supposed to be our PA today, but she's home with a little bit of a fever, and she doesn't have COVID, but she's just under the weather. So she contacted me and asked me if I would be her substitute. And fortunately, she gave me the reading, so I don't have to, I didn't have to make up my own. Anyway, welcome. A few announcements now. Early Birds meet Sunday morning at 9:30 via Zoom, and link is in the weekly email and on the website. And we just this morning started the book Practical Metaphysics by Eric Butterworth. So I think we're going to have a good time with that. Upcoming speakers in January, next Sunday, Dr. Edwin will be our speaker. Randy Granger is going to be here on the 8th. The 15th is Reverend Kamatara. Peggy Shin on the 22nd. And we'll have a video called How to Be Happy Every Day. It Will Change the World on the 29th. So quite a smorgasbord for January. They all sound fascinating. The lunch bunch will meet on Wednesday, January the 11th at 11:30 at Cracker Barrel. We've changed from Tuesday to Wednesday to fit people's schedules a little better. And that same night will be the board meeting at 6:30 on Zoom, and anyone is welcome to attend that. And just ask Edward for the link if you want to do so and aren't already a board member. On the 12th of January, we're going to start the Thursday evening group up again. And that'll be at 7 p.m. and also available on Zoom. Lastly, our prayer team remains ready to serve and support you. You may submit a request via our webpage or give it to Edward. Our prayer team meets virtually on Tuesday afternoons at 4:15 to pray with you. You may consider sitting in your quiet space during that time. We know we are one in spirit, and the energy of prayer knows no limits. Invocation. We are all part of the one spirit that some call God. And we are so fortunate to be able to realize that together and celebrate that with each other each Sunday. And so it is. And please stand and we'll sing the Song of Joy if you wish to, or stay seated if you would like. Thank you. You may be seated if you like, and we will do our vision, our mission, and our affirmation. Our vision: to elevate spiritual consciousness in our world. Our mission: to support individual spiritual quests through celebration, study, counsel, loving fellowship, and service. And our affirmation: I welcome the light and love of the divine to shine in me, through me, as me. I am the light in the darkness for those around me, and only grow the light the more that I share this divine spark with others. We magnify this light in our community together.
Edwin, we need you. And now appearing, the three kings.
Very, very nice. It's time for our reading. And like I said, this came from Vicky. It's called Birthing Christ Consciousness by Lynn Forrest. And Lynn Forrest is quite a well-known speaker and has video. You can find her on Google and on YouTube if you're curious. Christmas is the time of year for commemorating the birth of the historical Christ child. Christmas is also of parallel importance to each of us individually as we take time to make room for the Christ consciousness within our own heart. The biblical account of the advent of Christ, Matthew 1:18-25 and 2:1-12, contains much that is equally applicable to our own awakening. The Christmas story is relevant to each of us personally because it helps us better understand our own spiritual rebirth. From the description of the Immaculate Conception, to the encounter of the 3 wise men with Herod, to the journey to Bethlehem where the Holy Child was delivered in a stable because there was no room in the inn, all of it has special meaning to us. Starting with the chosen parents, Mary and Joseph, who we come to see as the masculine and feminine principles within ourselves, we begin to relate the Christ story to our own unfolding. Joseph, as the masculine aspect or logos, is our intellect, the mental aspect of ourselves. Regardless of how intelligent we may be, our intellect cannot parent a new consciousness. Like Joseph, the intellect is not capable of really even comprehending what it means to birth the divine, much less be capable of fathering it. And like Joseph, we too must act on faith rather than on our intellect. Even though our mind may not be able to fully grasp the understanding of this internal sacred event, it still is asked to play a vital part in governing the welfare of the Christ consciousness within us. For although our intellect is not the creator of the Christ consciousness, it is needed to protect, guide, and support the growth of that new being birthed in us through Mary, the Holy Mother, who represents our sacred feminine principle, that which does birth the Christ child within us. Mary represents the very highest emotional experience that we as human beings can have. She is our pure love connection with Source, that part of us that is totally faithful to God and delivers the Christ child through our intuition or spiritual knowing of God. It is through the divine feminine that the Christ is born in us. It is through the virgin awareness of pure intuition that our own spiritual identity is inspired and recognized. A pure heart always magnifies the Spirit of God in us. And our heart serves as a stable where the child, because there was no room in the crowded inn, our own minds, is born. Like the inn that faded night, our own minds are too full to make room for the sacred. We crowd out the Christ child with all of our limiting stories about who we are or need to be until there is no room for the advent of Christ consciousness. But there, in that lowliest, most humble of places, in the poverty of our own hearts, we can find room. That is where we find the baby lying in the manger. There the Christ child is comfortable, for it does not matter what the conditions of our heart are. It can still be a stable environment for the Christ energy to come forth. The heart is that inner space where only the bare essentials are needed. All presumptions, all superficiality has been stripped away. Only nature and spirit remain. Herod, too, represents a part of our own mind. He is the puppet king in us, our ego ruler. He is that part of us that is threatened by the Christ energy and wants to destroy it. The ego is always threatened by the birth of that which dissolves fear and resistance. For it rules us by such things, and so is that part of us that prevents spiritual growth. The three wise men represent our three inner bodies, mental, emotional, and physical, who seek to align with the Christ energy by following the guiding star, our inner guiding light, to the heart where the divine child lies. The wise men come bearing gifts for the Christ child of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These two have spiritual significance. Gold is a symbol of refined consciousness. It is the gift of the physical that has been refined and transformed. Frankincense, which is a kind of incense, is a symbol of priesthood representing our emotional aspirations, unified with spirit through our prayer connection with Source. And the third gift was myrrh, an embalming oil, which symbolizes the bitterness we suffer through the mind and the mental egoic death we must each suffer to claim our right as spiritual sons and daughters of divine consciousness. This, then, is the story of the birthing of our very own Christ consciousness. I hope you will take time to rest deeply in the stable of your own heart through this holiday season. Make room in your heart for the birthing of the Christ consciousness through quiet times of thankfulness for the tidings of great joy that the Christ brings to you. Rejoice, for this Advent will indeed transform your whole being. Blessings for the Holy Child within you. Lynn. Now we're ready for the message, I believe.
Okay. Oops, want to dance? See if we can do this without pulling it off. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Merry Christmas. And Vicki, thank you for the reading. And Jim, thank you for reading the reading, as Vicki discovered or found. I guess I was kind of starting this off with a little discussion about the history of Christmas, because we probably are never going to know when Jesus was born, what day Jesus was born. But the first recorded reference of the use of the day was that they began to celebrate his birthday on December 25th in 336 AD. So for the first 300 years, they didn't bother celebrating Jesus's birthday. And all the early saints, what they typically did was celebrate the date of their passing, interestingly enough. So it wasn't until the 6th century that a monk decided that, and he started the tradition of beginning history on the 25th of December, year 1. You know, so we have AD and BC, and now we have BC and AC. So before COVID and after COVID, right? Okay, anyway. So later on, December 25th was given a little bit more credence. However, they felt like the dates could have ranged anywhere from mid-November to March. But later, the church decided by consensus that the conception occurred on March 25th. Therefore, 9 months later, Jesus was born in December. Okay, go figure. All right. And of course, we know that the early church co-opted many of the early, what we might have thought of as pagan traditions that were revolving around the winter solstice, and decided we're going to kind of scooch those all together and call it Christmas. Yeah, claim them. That's right. That way we can kind of keep these other folks from doing their celebrations. So today, for obvious reasons, I'm going to speak about the gift of the Christ consciousness, which is associated with the birth of Jesus. And I think nowadays, unfortunately, the arrival of Santa Claus, who was originally Saint Nick, is celebrated just about as religiously as the religious reason for the season. And I went to our Science of Mind, which is Ernest Holmes, and some of what I'm going to speak about is directly and indirectly out of chapter 22 of the Science of Mind magazine, or not magazine, but the big textbook. And let's remember that Jesus's last name was not Christ. Right? It wasn't Jesus Christ, it was Jesus the Christ. But as Jesus the Christ was incarnated, the Christ consciousness arrived on the earth. So, I mean, it had already always been available, but it became much more explicitly available, maybe I'll say, with Jesus's birth. Now, we don't hear too much about Jesus's life before the age of 12, but I imagine, you know, as any child would do, or as we might do, he practiced some of the same powers that we saw him exhibit later on in his life. You know, perhaps finding the wounded bird and breathing life into it and letting it go back. Similarly, I think we, as we open up spirituality, we bring what has always been in our unconscious to our conscious. And it may happen slowly or it may happen rapidly, and it's different for all of us. Some of us take baby steps and others, you know, do a massive jump. So as I talked about the gift of the Christ consciousness, let's go back and go to the definition and see what the definition of gift is. And that is something voluntarily transferred without compensation. Now, I know some folks who don't open their Christmas presents on Christmas. They might wait till March or April before they open them up. You're not laughing. We know who we're talking about, at least in some cases. Nevertheless, the gift has still been given, right? And so the way I relate this to the gift of the Christ consciousness is that the Christ consciousness is always available, has been gifted, but we're not forced to accept it. So we might choose for a time period not to step into the Christ consciousness or to exhibit its characteristics. But still, at the arrival of the the Christ consciousness on Earth, it raised the collective consciousness of the planet. I've got these abbreviations here. CC, it's like, which CC is that? Well, but maybe it's one and the same. The Christ consciousness is the collective consciousness. Okay. I think of it maybe this way. You take a bowl of water and you put a sand into the water, a grain of sand into the water, and it raises the level of the water a little bit. You put a pebble into the water and it raises it perhaps more noticeably. And so if we think about that as the arrival of the Christ consciousness, that created a much larger movement into the collective consciousness than perhaps any one individual raising their consciousness would. So in addition to just the presence of the Christ consciousness, there was a lot going on at the intellectual level. And so I'll talk about that a little bit. So as Jesus began teaching the new concepts and ways of thinking, these were introduced to the Western world. But we also know that Jesus did spend time in the East. But mostly we'll be speaking about the Western world. I'm also going to step back for a moment and say I'm going to use the word Jesus a lot today. We don't usually talk about Jesus in New Thought. But again, if you look at Ernest Holmes, he has an entire chapter dedicated to the discussion of Jesus. So our Christian religion is purportedly to be based on the teachings of Jesus, but I think much of it has been rewritten to serve the political purposes of the early Roman Catholic Church. And I'll kind of touch on some of that as we go through. But at any rate, no one has denied that the New Thought teachers have used many of the original teachings of Jesus as models for their teachings. So I have about 4 of them here. First one, we are all typically said, we are all sons of the Father. We are all children of God. We're all children of Mother, Father, God. The use of Son and the use of Father is really the generic term to mean all human and God on the Father. So the church, at least as I'm reading some things, says that the church taught that Jesus was the only begotten Son of God. Remember that? I mean, we received, depending on what your starter church was, we recited that. I think the correct interpretation should have been that the Son or the Christ was begotten of the only Father. Just by switching where that word is, it makes a huge difference. Because another part of Jesus' teaching was that the Christ consciousness is available to all. But if we interpret it the first way, then there's one guy and that's it. The rest of us are out of luck. So each of us partakes of the Christ nature to the degree that the Christ is revealed through us. And to that degree, we become the Christ ourselves. And the power of the Christ comes at a varying degree to all people of all ages. Part of the Christness is what we thought of as some of the powers that Jesus used. One of those is the power of the Word. Now, a lot of times in New Thought, we speak about the law. We talk about, we put it into the law, we leave it in the law and so forth. But the law is subject to the Word. So when the Word is spoken, the law always says yes, and it begins immediately to manifest that. So another concept that Jesus taught is I and the Father are one. And again, I and the Mother, Father, God are one, however makes it easier for you. And Spirit or God is supreme and infinite, a limitless personality, limitless possibility. And so as we come to the sense of communion with that, we would demonstrate all these God characteristics instantaneously. Jesus located God in his own soul. So complete was this realization that he was unable to find a place where the being of Jesus began and the being of God left off, or where the being of God began and Jesus ceased to be. So as I kind of emphasized in the earlier one about the only begotten or the begotten of the only Father, I think it'd be an error to suppose that Jesus was different from other humans. He was a man who knew himself and his direct relationship to the whole. And to think of him as being different is to misunderstand his mission and purpose in life. He was a way shower and proved his way to be a correct one. He believed in God, in himself, as a power and reality. Believing in God within, he was compelled to believe in himself. And of course, Jesus believed in the God within everyone, as demonstrated by his statement, greater things than these even you shall do. There's a precious little book by someone who calls themselves Flynn. It's about a little street waif who comes into the life of the author. And he finds this little person sitting on a grate outside of a bakery shop in the middle of the night, trying to keep warm. And he sits down next to this little child, maybe 5 or 6, and they start talking. And he decides he's going to bring this child home to his mother and his brothers and sisters. And I get the impression that this fellow, he was like 6 something or another. He was a big fellow. He was maybe in his 20s or something. And so every night when the little girl kneels down to pray, she starts her prayer with, "Mr. God, this is Anna," and hence the name of the book. But relating this to what we were saying about where did Jesus end and God start, she said, one of her expressions was, "God is in my middle, and I am in God's middle." Wrap your head around that. Yeah. Which, of course, leads me to the next concept or teaching that I'm choosing to speak about today. And that is, we each have a personal relationship with God. Just like Anna was very clear. There's no reason to go through a third party to communicate with God. It's interesting that Jesus made that point. But later on, the Roman Catholic Church, at least I believe it was them, inserted this third party concept. Prior to that, we still had, I believe in the Jewish religion, I don't profess to be a scholar of all the religions, but you had the big dude in the temple that you had to go through to get to God. And Jesus said, "Hey, no, every one of you can go directly to God." And so then the Roman Catholic Church decided they needed to get involved. So they said, "Okay, you got to come through me, you got to go do this and that and all these other things. But don't you dare try to speak directly to God." So certainly in New Thought, we understand that we don't need anybody to intercede between us and God. And so just like in the book that I was speaking of, Mr. God, this is Anna. Anna was on I would say first name basis, but I don't know that God has a first name. And if you call him Mr., then maybe it's not. But she had a close personal relationship. There was no question about that. So the fourth concept I want to talk about is love and forgiveness. And Jesus knew that some had misinterpreted the Mosaic law of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, when he said, "You heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. However, I say to you, do not resist the one who is wicked, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other also to him." So Jesus emphasized that love is the dominant nature of God's law. He said, "You must love your God. This is the greatest and first commandment. The second, like it, is you must love your neighbor as yourself." So Jesus taught that love, not vindictiveness, would identify his true followers. And that is another Bible quote. I feel like we've kind of misconstrued this last statement to the extent that when we say love our neighbor as ourselves, we kind of, in practice, we love our neighbors more than ourselves. Sometimes we ignore our own needs while tending to the needs of others. So love our neighbor as ourselves requires loving ourselves first. So love is kind of like cheese, in case you hadn't noticed. In particular, the cheese I'm talking about is maybe a brick of Swiss cheese. And in this cheese, there are holes. And in the holes of love, one might be my mother this, my father did that, my brother, my sister, my teacher, whatever. They somehow took something of our cheese. And so we have a hole in there. It might be identified as mother. And so part of ourselves is over there, outside of ourselves now. It's not inside ourselves. Or maybe, I would feel so much better if I had a new car. Well, so there's a little hole in you where a new car isn't. And there's a little bit of you who's over there on the new car. Especially you drive by the dealership every day and look at it, right? So if you have holes in your cheese, so to speak, then we're constantly looking or needing something to fill these holes. If your love has a lot of holes in it, you can't truly give it to somebody else. How can you give unconditional love when this hole in your love, associated perhaps with something that has passed, say a childhood hurt or whatever, but now every time we see someone who reminds us of that, we have certain expectations that hadn't been fulfilled the last time when we met that person. So how can we be unconditional about our love if we have expectations about everybody else? If you truly loved me, you would read my mind and you would give me exactly what I'm missing. That kind of thing. Anyway, in addition, loving ourselves means forgiving ourselves for any and all real or imagined errors in our thinking or behavior. What greater love, or what greater way can you love yourself than to accept and to know that no matter what you or we are so beloved. No matter what, we are so beloved. As an expression, God didn't make no junk. So in closing, I want to touch on a theme in the Christmas story that was kind of mentioned in the reading as well. And that is the one that talks about there being no room in the inn. So Jesus and Mary were shown to the stable, and Jesus was born in the manger. And there's lots of significances of that part of the story, that Jesus was from humble beginnings or what have you. And again, I love the reading there. It said, to me, the truth is that the Christ child could not be born in an inn that was full. The light of the Christ consciousness cannot come and be born in a place that is full of other residents of whatever form or nature you want to call them, thoughts, feelings, what have you. So that means there must be room in our consciousness for that light to enter. There must be an opening for the presence to enter. We must open the door if we are to receive the divine presence. So let us learn to be still and let the truth speak through us, to be still and know that the inner light shines. Someone said that perhaps the greatest part about the creation story was the seventh day, that God rested. Sometimes we're so busy, especially this time of the year, give this, that, and everything else. We need to rest. We need to rest and open ourselves and allow the truth to speak through us Allow that presence to enter. So if we want love or peace or joy, we must make room in our hearts for love, peace, and joy to enter. Spirit is waiting and wanting to express through us. We must make room and open the door to it. The gift of the Christ consciousness has already been given. Let's open our hearts and accept it. And so it is. So let's take this to prayer. So part of our prayer is for those in our very local, our congregational community and the broader community of Las Cruces and also of the world, knowing that there are folks who are facing challenges. And perhaps it's just our definition of what it is they're facing. Perhaps it's their understanding of what it is they're facing. But we know that Spirit, or God, is all there is. Every single being on the planet, in the cosmos, is in the middle of God, and God is in the middle of them. There's no place where God is not. We just allow that truth to settle in to ourselves. No matter what we may be perceiving on the outside, we know that all is unfolding in perfect divine order for each and every one of us, everyone we know, everyone we care about, everyone in the world, even in the Ukraine, where we perceive there to be a great deal of violence and unrest happening. Even in the United States, that may be our perception, but we know that God has not left anybody out. God is nothing but love for every creature. God is looking at every one of us and saying, "Come hither, my beloved. Let me wrap you in my arms. Let me express into you and through you." So as we know that for ourselves, we then know that for everyone else. So we give great thanks that we actually have this understanding. Even if it's just burning as a small flame, we don't quite understand it all, but we know that there is no spot where God is not. So we just take that truth and we speak the word of it. We speak it into the law, and we know that the law must answer yes, yea, verily. And so we can release it because we know that it is already being acted upon by the infinite source, infinite spirit that is all there is. And so it is. So now we have, is it our three kings again? We have some more music. Fantastic.
Please feel free to sing along on any of these if you've heard them before. Is it time for that yet? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I thought maybe you were going to do more than one.
Oh, well.
Thank you for that nice song, the Three Kings. As we acknowledge and receive our virtual and in-person gifts, we give great thanks for the offerings already given and those we will be receiving, because we know that giving and receiving are both part of the one flow. We affirm that we are also part of that flow. We bless these gifts and know that they are multiplied throughout our community. There are a number of folks who have contributed to the production of this service. We are grateful for their service. We thank you for joining us today in Zoom land and here in the sanctuary. Lastly, stay around in the Zoom meeting after service to visit or join us in the social hall. Now, please stand as you are able and read with me the benediction followed by our congregational song. Spirit in the midst of us is mighty. Joy, peace, and eternal life are our true nature and flow through us into the world, and so it is.